Hey, and welcome back to another episode of this tutorial series. My name is Thijs, and today we're going to have a look at turning Anna, our digital insurance agent, into a voice-enabled phone-based AI agent. Let's have a quick look at what we're going to build.
Hi, and welcome to Insure Luna. What can I help you with?
Hey there, I'm looking for a copy of my invoice, please.
Sure, I can help you with that. Let's get started. Please enter your invoice number.
Is that the one that starts with 2024?
Yes, that's correct. The invoice number starts with 2024. Could you please provide me with your 7-digit invoice number that begins with 2024?
Sure, yeah, hold on. That's 2024 334.
Great. So I understand 202-4334. Let me send you a copy of that by email.
Great, thank you. The voice channel or phone-based customer service as such remains a highly important channel that cannot be ignored. So it's very important that you understand how to create digital or how to create voice-enabled experiences using Cognigy. Let's get started with planning our AI agent real quick. We've already built all the skills and a basic profile in the previous tutorial. So Anna can help with claims, she can help with sending invoice copies, and she can answer FAQs using Knowledge AI. The approach remains largely unchanged, but the one thing that we will focus on, of course, is adding voice features. We'll have a look at STT, TTS, and other voice-based components that we need to make Anna truly voice-enabled. Let's get started with a quick project recap. So let's have a look at what we built before. If we go to our Cognigy project by logging into the trial environment, you'll see that we have a nice dashboard, and there's one flow that most of the AI agent is orchestrated from, and that's the main flow. This flow has a number of components. We have a default case where we do a knowledge search. We have a invoice request intent where we handle invoice copies, and we have a submit claim intent that we can handle claims with. So the overall structure is well, it's pretty clear as such, right? One thing that's important to realize is that even though we have only two intents, so two transactions that we can explicitly handle, we do have the default case to the left where we can handle knowledge search using the search extract output node. And this is connected to our Knowledge AI database. And this knowledge base is where we uploaded the policy document. And this is where we can upload much more information if we want, so that we have a pretty solid overall AI agent. The question now is, how do we turn this into voice? So let's have a look at some of the considerations when working with voice. All right, so let's have a look at some of the considerations for phone agents. And there's good news and bad news. So let's start with the good news first. And the good news is that there's a lot of reusability in terms of content and components for voice-enabled experiences. What that means is that we can essentially just take our flows, our NLU, the integrations, right, Knowledge AI, and just reuse them. Like there's nothing that we really need to do to turn those components into voice-enabled components. It works out of the box. But there's challenges as well, right? And that is that latency. Latency plays a huge role in voice-enabled experiences, right? It can make or break a voice experiences. And we need to be really, really conscious of adding additional latency. But there's tools at our disposal that we have at our disposal that we can help or that we can use to help manage the latency, right? There's stuff like atmospheric sounds that we can play in the background, to fill silences. And of course, there's a huge range of STT and TTS providers, so speech to text and text to speech providers that we can use in conjunction with Cognigy that are integrated out of the box, right? And there's additional features like SSML, which is the markup language for speech, that we can use to put emphasis on certain words. So there's a lot that we can play around with to make a voice-enabled experience a lot better and a lot more engaging. But it also means that we have to be a little bit careful with using LLMs, for example, right? Because LLMs can add additional overhead. So, in order to understand this a little bit better, let's have a look at the anatomy of an actual voice interaction. So, what happens when someone says something and for the AI agent to answer. And the first step here is converting spoken words, so speech, to text for further processing. And this is what we call speech to text, sometimes referred to as ASR, right? And this is a really important step, and you'll find that it can vary a lot because it's hard to detect when someone finished speaking, for example, right? The next step is natural language understanding. And we already have this. We already have this in our previous tutorial, right, where we created intents, we set up knowledge AI, right? All of these things help us understand and interpret what the user wants to tell the AI agent. And of course, we need to come up with an answer, which is generally referred to as natural language generation. And this is a very broad definition for anything that generates an answer, which is typically a flow with predefined outputs, but it could also be dynamic output using LLM enhancements, like we did in the previous tutorial, right? Shaping the answer to the context of the conversation, or knowledge AI. And then we have text to speech. So we have an answer produced by the NLG step, right? But that's still text, so we need to convert it back to speech and stream it to the user, right? So this is the speech generation step, where it's all about voices, different voices that we can use, and this you'll find can add a lot of latency depending on the voice provider that we select. And then the final step is what we refer to as connectivity, right? There is some overhead that you need to plan with to some extent in terms of, connecting to a contact center, the networking, like the phone network. There's some latency that is added at this step as well, right? So that's something to keep in mind. It's something that you need to be aware of, right? Because the one thing we want to do is we want to minimize latency as much as possible in order for us to have a fluent, engaging, voice-enabled experience. Great. So let's start by voice enabling our existing digital AI agent. Let's have a look at the project itself. We're back in our flow, and we can essentially take this flow and call it. But if you go to the interaction panel and click on voice call, you'll see that the call button is grayed out. It says, for this feature to work, please configure voice preview settings in the project settings page. And this is something that we need to do first in order to get this to work. So let's go ahead to our settings and enable a voice API key, so a speech provider, so that we can actually call our AI agent. To do that, we go to the Manage menu in the left side panel. We click on Settings, and then the only thing we need to do is go into our voice preview settings and picking one of the three providers. Now, there's more speech providers that you can use with Cognigy, right? There's many more actually, but these are the three that we have built into the editor, so that we don't have to set up a phone number or anything like that, right? So this is the easier way to work in terms of building an experience. So we need to set up some credentials. You can find these credentials under the Azure speech provider settings, and all you need is a connection name, which is something that you can just make up, right? And then you need an API key, and you need a region that needs to be entered here. So let me go ahead and do that and copy that from the Azure Speech Services interface, and selecting first a name. We'll call it Azure Speech EMEA, because that's where my speech service in Azure is hosted right now. I'll enter an API key, and I will enter a region, and it really doesn't matter which region you select. The latency impact, even for a region that's very far away from where you are, is minimal. Let's click on Test Connection, and you see that we get a success message, which is great, which means that it should work. And if you now go to the voice panel, right at the right, the interaction panel, you see that the voice button, the dial button, is now green and enabled. So let's see what happens when we press Start Call. Well, it dials, but there's no output. So let's hang up and see why that is. As you can see, these are two two output nodes, so two say nodes, and both of them have structured or rich media, so structured content, right? And that's something that voice cannot pronounce, right? Voice cannot pronounce the image. We could send it to a GPT Vision API and have it describe the image, right? But it's not something that it can directly output on voice as such. So there's a really simple way around it. We can take any output, this image node, say node, or this one. And there's always the option to add fallback text. And that is not just for voice, it's in general. It essentially tells Cognigy, hey, if you cannot work with this rich media on the particular channel that we're on, just revert back to the fallback text, right? So that's the only thing we need to do. And now we call her again, and now she should answer.
Hi, and welcome to Insure Luna. What can I help you with?
Hey, this is Bob. So I have a child's car seat, and I was wondering, is that insured as well under my insurance policy?
Yes, a child's car seat is covered under your insurance policy. If it is stolen or damaged by theft or fire, your car insurance will pay out up to $300 to repair or replace the child car seat.
Oh, great. So could I also get a copy of my invoice, please?
Okay, I can help you with your invoice. Please enter your invoice number.
Is that the one that starts with 33?
Thank you for providing the information, but I believe there might be a misunderstanding. The invoice number should be 7 digits long and start with 2024. Could you please double check the invoice number and provide it again?
Yeah, that's 2024 3 times 5.
Thank you for confirming the correct format of the invoice number. However, it seems there might still be a mistake.
Well, so we got quite far, right? First off, she answered, she picked up, right? Knowledge AI worked. It was still a little bit slow, but we'll have a look at how to mitigate the latency later on. The intent was found, right? So our request invoice flow was correctly triggered. The output nodes worked, the question node worked, and even the LLM-based reprompting worked, right? When I said, hey, is that the number starting with 33? It said, hey, that's not the correct number. It needs to be 7 digits, needs to start with 2024, etc. But when I then actually entered the correct number, right, it still didn't get it, right? This is where we got stuck. So the reason for that is that with voice, you sometimes need to handle certain types of input, and we have a really nice feature for that I'll show you in just a bit when we focus on the request invoice copy process. But for now, I just wanted to bring across and show you that this actually works on voice. So we configured a voice provider, we we added the default fallback text here, right? And the intents, the knowledge search, right, the basic flow construct, everything works out of the box with exactly the same flow on voice as well. All right, so configuring speech to text in a bit more detail is something that is really easy to do. There's essentially two ways to go about it. First of all, we could do it on a node level. So what we could do is we could say, well, let's take this say node here, right, with the default text. We can add a channel override, right, and say like, well, if this is about the voice gateway, right, if this node is hit when a user is calling in, so we use the voice gateway, then we have the option to set so-called activity parameters. And if you enable it, you see that you can do something with the speech to text. So you can pick another provider. So maybe instead of Microsoft, you pick, I don't know, DeepGram, right? Then you pick a language. You can pick one of the specific models that they have, right? And this, of course, is really, really powerful because what this allows you to do, let me collapse this again, is this allows you to change the speech to text and all the other settings, by the way, that we'll come to in a bit, right, on a node level, which is really powerful. So imagine, having a scenario where you have maybe a fine-tuned speech-to-text model, and you want to use it only when we ask for an invoice number, because that's where it's really good at. Then you can override the STT settings on this specific question node, right, or this node, or this node. It's on a node level if you want. In reality, however, you would maybe start with an overall setting that just goes for the whole flow and for the whole AI agent, right? And if you want to do that, then what's easier is to add a node here that sits under extensions, voice gateway, and then we have a set session config node that does exactly what the name suggests, right? It sets a configuration for the entire session, right? So we can add this node here, and I typically add it here under the once on first time because I only want to configure this once. I don't necessarily want to update it. If I wanted to update something like I just explained, I could still do this and then override it for a specific node, right? So you can combine these two approaches. Now we have the set session config node, and we'll focus on speech to text first. So I'll go to speech to text. I'll click on Microsoft because that's the one that we have configured, and I will keep English as an input language, right? And you see we have a couple of things that we can do. We can set a number of hints, so we can literally tell the STT engine, hey, expect something like the following word or definition. And why would you would do that if you, for example, ask a user to confirm their last name, right? And or maybe their full name, right? And you have a first name like mine, Thijs, which is spelled Thijs. That's not something an English speech to text engine would get out of the box. So what we could do is we could literally type in a hint here, right? We can actually add more hints or variations, right? And then it can dynamically take that into account. This is something that you might want to do only where it's needed, right? And you can also add dynamic hints, so you can use dynamic information. Really cool, because maybe you pulled information from a CRM system about the customer, right? When you asked them for their, or when you detected the phone number and then maybe asked them for their zip code, and then you just want to confirm their last name with them, right? And then you already have the last name, so you can dynamically add that here, right? You could literally do something like last name, and then it can take the last name into account and tell the speech to text engine to to look out for that last name. Really cool. We have voice activity detection, right? We have the ability to recognize languages, also part of the speech to text. This does vary per speech to text provider, so Microsoft can do this, for example, but not all providers. We have an advanced STT configuration. Again, sometimes you have a custom model that you fine-tuned, so a custom speech-to-text model. You can actually add that here, and then Cognigy will use that. But there's also stuff like barge in that we can use, right? So maybe in some cases you want to be able to interrupt a bot, and then we have a setting that lets us configure after how many words we want this barge in to be triggered. Why would you not leave this at one? Because sometimes if you cough, right, or you have a background noise, right, it will immediately interrupt the bot because it thinks that you're trying to barge in, right? So having 2 or 3 words is a little bit more robust. Let's actually see if this works. I'll call the AI agent real quick.
Hi, and
Hey, so
welcome
I
to
need a
Insure
copy
Luna.
of my invoice, please.
Okay, I can help you with your invoice.
That's really cool, right? So this is what you can do with speech to text. There's many more settings, right? But know that you can add a set session config node at the start or anywhere really, right? But typically at the start, and then you have the ability to override the speech to text settings. And just getting back to Deep Crime real quick, because I think that they're really strong in their offering. You have features like specific models that they support, that they offer, right? So models that are optimized for phone calls, for example. But they have a really cool feature called endpointing, which is essentially letting DeepRAM determine when someone finished speaking, right? Because that can add a lot of latency. If the STT engine cannot get that right and is still waiting for you to finish your sentence, even though you already finished, right? That's essentially wasting time, right? So with DeepRAM, you can actually be a little bit more aggressive about the endpointing, right? And literally bring it down to 150 milliseconds, for example. And this is really powerful. Remember the overview where we had all the stages of a voice interaction, right? Reducing the first step to 150 milliseconds, of course, is really powerful. All right, so let's now focus on TTS. I'll go back to my set session config node, and I will actually pick another voice. I'll take South Africa, and I'll take Leah as a voice, right? So you see that we have different TTS vendors, and please note that we also have providers like 11 Labs, which have very natural voices. For now, I just want to show you what happens if you change the voice altogether.
Hi and welcome to Insure Luna. What can I help you with?
Sounds a little bit robotic, right? It's not the strongest voice in the Microsoft arsenal, but it's something that you have access to, and that's really important to note. Let's try one more. Maybe I'll go for United Kingdom, right? Pick another English voice with a different accent. I'll pick Libby in this case,
Hi and welcome to Insure Luna. What can I help you with?
and we got a beautiful British accent. So the other thing that we can do with text to speech is we can change the output or the pronunciation in individual notes, right? So this is the one that applies to the whole session, right? And actually, let me put her back to United States because I don't have a British accent, and I think it sounds a little bit weird when you have a US person speaking and then you have a UK voice bot, because in reality you would want to tailor that. You want to make sure that whenever a US hotline is called, you have a US voice, and whenever a UK hotline is called, you have a British accent, right? Because that's really easy to set up, as we've just seen, right? So that's definitely something you should consider. Now, what happens if I want to pronounce certain things differently? So let's say that we have our opening message here, right? What I can do is I can say, well, this fallback, I'll leave it, but I'll override it specifically for voice gateway, and I'll add the text here. So what happens now, and this is the way this override system works, right? If you don't select additional channels, it will just take whatever is configured here under this AI tab, including the fallback text. However, if you override something, maybe for WhatsApp or another channel, in this case, voice gateway, whenever someone uses that channel, it will take this override instead, right? So it's optional, but it's something that's often used if you want to have a little bit more control. So maybe we want to tweak the way this text is pronounced a little bit, right? So what we can do is we can use SSML for that. Now, maybe I want to say, I want to put some emphasis on the word high, right? So that what I can do is I can actually use one of these pre-built SSML tags and say, put an emphasis, strong emphasis level on the word high, and then it says, and welcome to Insure Luna, right? There's different things that we can do. I will expand this a little bit. We also have tags that lets you pronounce certain things in a certain way. Maybe you want it, maybe you want to take a timestamp and then have it pronounced as a time or a date, the way a human would. You can also use cardinal and ordinal pronunciation, or have it spell out characters, right? So let's play around with it a little bit. Welcome to Insure Luna, spelled Insure Luna, like so. And then we take this Insure Luna output here, and then we take this say as, and then we say characters, right? And let's see what happens if we do that. So again, I'll call the bot. We'll see what she says.
Hi and welcome to Insure Luna, spelled INSURELUNA.
Right, so this is something that we can very easily tweak. Having said all of this, right, what we are seeing with the latest TTS providers, and this also goes for Microsoft, by the way, is that as we have more and more, Gen AI driven voices, the TTS tweaking using SSML is becoming less important, right? You can imagine the outputs of these text here, and therefore the speech, are becoming more and more dynamic, especially if you use something like Knowledge.AI or other, LLM rephrased output. All of that is dynamic, so we cannot really predict what the sentence is going to look like exactly, right? And it's not deterministic, right? So what it means is that the TTS or the SSML is not something we can use in that scenario. And it also tends to sound a little bit artificial, in my opinion, right? But you should be aware of it. Please know that this is available. Another thing here is you can also go to the interaction panel and hover over the output, and then you have a voice preview, so you don't have to call the bot every single time, right? You can also play around with this voice preview panel here, where you can also change the text to speech, right, and the voices and the provider, and then we can just
Hi and welcome to Insure Luna.
play around with it like that, right? So you have the SSML editor, We have a really nice, slightly more technical editor here if you want to go all out, right? So this is available as well if you go to the interaction panel and hover over the TTS outputs. All right, so you learned a lot about STT, you learned a lot about TTS. Let's now focus on the request invoice copy flow, right? This process that we built here. And one thing that we found is that it does recognize the intent on voice. There's nothing we really had to do for that, right? But it kind of got stuck at this question node. And that is because the question type, it's not just a number or a date, it would get that quite well. It's a specific pattern that we configured here in our digital AI agents. And the reason for that is that this is the more realistic scenario. In organizations, you'll typically have a specific format for invoice numbers or policy numbers, right? So you might have something like it starts with AB or with 2 letters and then there's 5 digits. So that's where you would use a regular expression. Now, what we found when we tested it earlier on, right, is that it sometimes doesn't get the speech to text transcription right, especially when it's about numbers, right? So I said something like 3 times 4, and then it literally wrote 3 times, right? So the asterisk and then 4. And that's not what we want. What we want, we actually want to have 7 digits in total, right? So 2024, and then maybe 3 times the 4 as actual digits written out as numbers, not as words. So how do you deal with that? Well, we have a really nice section here at the bottom of every question node that's called answer preprocessing. And this is a really powerful feature. What we can do is we can say, well, let's actually enable some of this. Let's clean some disallowed symbols, which will remove stuff like slashes, right? Or maybe stuff like weird, maybe weird symbols that it transcribed. We have the ability to resolve spelled out numbers, right? So 5 and 319 would then become 5 and 319. That's definitely something that we need. We don't really need to resolve phonetic alphabets, right? This would, help you with, someone spelling something and saying Alpha Tango Lima, so that we do ATL, or I can even do Anton Ida Otto, right, or a variation. We don't need this, but please be aware that this is available. We can replace specific phrases, right? We don't really need that right now. We don't need a spelled out alphabet, but I do want to have phonetic counters, right? Like 3 times 2, that should become 222. And that's exactly what went wrong when we tested this previously based on the digital configuration. Contract single characters, yeah, could be helpful, but it's not required for this. Contract number groups, yes, I do want it to contract number groups. I want the result to be trimmed. That would be ideal, and I want to rerun Cognigy NLU after it finished pre-processing the answer input, right? So that we can then have that run against our pattern here, see if it actually got all of that right. So let's try it out. I'll call the bot the AI agent again.
Hi, and welcome to Insure Luna. What can I help you with?
Hey, I need a copy of my invoice.
Okay, I can help you with your invoice. Please enter your invoice number.
Yeah, that is 2024 and then 3 times 4.
Thank you for providing the information, but I believe there might be a mistake.
So let's have a look. What it actually did is it did write 3 times 4, and let me check the setting for that. So we have, let me turn this one off. So I'll spell out alphabet. This one, spelled out numbers, phonetic counters should actually work. Okay. So what happened here is it actually wrote an asterisk here, right? So what we can do here with this setting is take an asterisk, right, and replace it with the word times. Let's try it again.
Hi, and welcome to Insure Luna. What can I help you with?
Hey, I'm actually looking for an invoice copy.
Okay, I can help you with your invoice. Please enter your invoice number.
That is 2024 3 times 5.
Great. So I understand 2024555.
Excellent. Let's try it again.
Hi, and welcome to Insure Luna. What can I help you with?
Could you provide me a copy of my invoice?
Okay, I can help you with your invoice. Please enter your invoice number.
Is that the one that starts with 2024?
Yes, that's correct. The invoice number starts with 2024. Could you please provide me with your 7-digit invoice number starting with 2024?
Sure. So yeah, that's 2024 445.
Great. So I understand 2024445. Let me send you a copy of that by email.
And this is actually pretty robust, right? This seems to work quite well. So this is how we improve the request invoice copy flow, right? There used to be another question that I disabled. It's about the email address. Now I disabled it for now. Getting email addresses on voice is quite hard, so I don't want to focus on that right now. The way you would handle it is using a so-called xApp, so a cross-modal experience, and we will use an xApp. I want to show you how that works, but I want to show you how that works as part of our submit claim process instead. All right, so in order to show you how xApps work with voice, I will switch to the authentication flow that we build as part of the digital AI agent. And if we go and look at the flow, it's actually pretty straightforward. We started with an adaptive card, so the login screen. We then did the authentication using some code here, right, where we literally just check if these inputs are correct. Then we pause for 2 seconds to make sure that the user experience does not go too fast, right? We want to make sure that the user understands what's going on. And then we check whether the user was authenticated, so whether the credentials were valid or not. And if so, then we say you've been successfully authenticated. If not, then it goes here and it says, looks like something went wrong, please try again. And then we start over. So how do you use adaptive cards to make this process the same flow compatible with voice? Well, of course, what we could do is we first need to figure out whether we are on a voice channel. So let's start with that. We have an if statement here, right, at the top, and then what we do is we say, well, if the channel, we can click on the AI icon here, right, and then we type channel. If the channel is voice gateway 2, that's the name of the voice channel, right? Then we should go here, and otherwise we just want to run the normal, right, authentication for digital. And then this part can essentially stay the same, right? So we don't really need to do anything there, but we do need to make this part voice compatible. So let's first start with adding some information. We will ask the user to click on a link, right, which will trigger the xApp to then log in. Because what we want to do is we want to essentially use the exact same login form and send it to the user dynamically while they're on the phone call, right? And that's what the xApps allow us to do. So I'll enter this text here. Please click on the link to log into your account. Now we need to initialize an xApp session. In order to do that, we simply add a new node and we look for xApp, and then there's the init session node that we can select. And if we open it, there's a whole bunch of settings that we can configure. There's loading screens, there's transition screens, and all of that. I'm just going to leave it as such, right? But please know that you can customize this and make it look in line with your branding, your corporate identity. And then what would normally happen is we would, on an actual scenario, is we would use maybe Twilio, right, to actually send an SMS to the user, right? So let's say that we have their phone number here, and this would then dynamically be the voice gateway caller number, right? So this is how you get the phone number. And then, or actually, this is a number that we know because we send it from Twilio. So let's say that this is a number that we have configured with Twilio, and then the receiver number is the voice gateway caller number, so whatever number the user is calling from. And then the message body would go something like this and say like, hey, or hello, please log in via the following link. And then the link would also be a dynamic piece of information, which is the xApp session URL. This is all available out of the box, right? These tokens, you don't have to set anything up for that. All we need to do is get this link to the user so that they can log in. We could theoretically also send an email, right? And then what happens after that, and I cannot actually use this note right now because I didn't configure Twilio. What happens after that is we would then show the xApp itself, right? So we say show an xApp. We can show HTML, but we can also show an adaptive card, which is exactly what we want to do, because we'll just take the adaptive card that we configured here, right? And we will paste it in here. And now it can show the exact same adaptive card. Again, there's style overrides. We have so-called waiting behavior where we can wait for the xApp input. But there's another way to handle it with slightly more flexibility that I'll show you instead. And then you can also use this approach like an xApp for a full screen web chat overlay. Right? I'm not going to do that now. We already have a nice solution for our digital agent, but please know that it's there. And then one thing that we want to do is we want to actually let the rest of the flow know that once this has been achieved, once the user has filled out the xApp, then the authentication should be set to true, right? So what we can do is we can use the add to context node for that, and we can say authenticated, right, is true, like so. So this will be one way of doing it, or we can use a code node for slightly more control, right? And then we can literally set it like this. And I prefer this way. The reason for that is that I have more control. It's just a thing that I prefer, right? So we say set authenticated true or something like that. And then theoretically the rest of the logic should still work, right? So we now have the login flow, the authentication flow, and we have two different versions of it. Now, one thing we need to do is we cannot really, I cannot, receive an SMS here in this interaction panel. So we could actually configure it to an actual phone number with voice gateway and then try it out end to end. For now, I want to show you an alternative that I always use for debugging that you should probably use as well. And that is you can literally take this URL and just output it to the user here in the interaction panel as well. We can use text with buttons and say, click on the following link to log in, just like we would do with the SMS, right? And then we add a button, and the button links to a URL, and then the URL, of course, is the xApp URL, the session URL, right? And then we say, click here, or maybe even better, open xApp, because xApps, they work in a browser, right? So they also work here. You can also use them on WhatsApp if you want to process a payment via WhatsApp. It's not uniquely tailored to voice, but it's something you would use quite often on voice, right? Especially for scenarios like this where you want a user to authenticate. So let's see how this actually works. So what I'll do is I'll open my interaction panel, and I will call this flow directly. I want to start directly in this flow. I don't want to start in the main flow. It's already hooked up, right? So we could also start it from the main flow, but I want to focus on this process here first, and I don't want to have to go through the whole intent and do everything until we get to this point. So let me call and see what happens.
All right. Please click on the link to log into your account. You've been
And there's one thing that we forgot to do. It ran through the whole flow, right? Actually, we need to wait for the xApp input to arrive, right? And we already saw that we can do that with the xApp itself, or sorry, with the xApp display itself, where we have waiting behavior, right? So we can simply say, okay, wait for the xApp user input. Let me enable that.
All right. Please click on the link to log into your account. You've been successfully authenticated.
And there we go, right? So this worked end to end. We literally got the same login screen that we got on the digital channel, right? And as soon as we entered the information, the flow continued. I mentioned before that you might want to do something different in terms of waiting. This waiting behavior, I can also turn it off here. And what I can do instead is I can actually add a question node, right? And then this question node has input type xApp. We want to wait for xApp data. And then one of the things that we can do is we can use clever reprompting. So we could say, you know what, please take your sure, please, or please take your time. I will wait, or something like this, right? So we can use the question mechanics that we have, including uh, like reprompting, right? Maybe even use an LLM in case people have questions, right? And we can then use that to make the experience a little bit more engaging, right? So you could literally say, let's take an LLM prompt here, and then right have some more information in case people ask questions while logging in. So let's try this one more time.
All right. Please click on the link to log into your account.
Okay, just a second. I'm filling out the form.
Please take your time. I will wait. You've been successfully authenticated.
And there we go. Right, so you see that using a question node here to handle or wait for the xApp to complete simply by selecting xApp as a type allows you to configure even more stuff, right? You can do reprompting, we can add contextual FAQs, use an LLM for that, and you can imagine that in a scenario like this, people might need a little bit more time. Great. So let's now go back to our main flow, right? And whenever the submit claim process is triggered, we want to execute. So we want to run the auth flow, right, and then continue with the rest of the claim process. And we could also use an xApp to upload an image, right? So all of these transactional things that are possible on digital that we set up, we can very easily use xApps for that as well. And I just want to quickly show you the repository of xApps that we have available in our documentation, right? So we have all of this very well documented, and it shows you how to build them in a bit more detail, how to build a standalone xApp, right? So we have tutorials for that. We also have ready-made xApps that I wanted to quickly show you, right? And if I go to the xApp repository that we have here, you see that there's some that we have pre-built, like maybe a flight seat picker, right? This is a really cool one. So picking a seat. Credit card handling is another one. We have a Stripe payments if you want to use a third-party payment processor. And all of these xApps are already built, so you can use them. Calendly, of course, also really nice if you want to schedule a meeting, right? So please know that this is a repository that is available. Taking a photo, we could use that for our upload of the image, right? If we want to upload the picture, just like we did for digital, these are all xApps that are available, and it's very well documented. You can go through the tutorials. We'll explain and show you in a lot more detail how to build them, and these are truly one of the differentiating features that we have in the Cognigy platform. So that essentially concludes the tutorial that we have. So converting a digital agent to a voice experience, right? The key takeaways here are that voice is not hard to set up, right? A lot of the standard components like the flows, the NLU, knowledge AI works out of the box with voice, but voice definitely is something that you need to optimize if you want to do it well. So we looked at the STT, we looked at the input, pre-processing, for example, like cleaning up the STT inputs. We also looked at TTS, how to change the voice, how to work with different accents, right? And we looked at how to handle transactions, even on a voice channel, by introducing extra modalities through an xApp. So there's one more topic that I want to touch upon, and that is contact center integration. So far, we've built everything in the Cognigy editor, the Cognigy platform itself, and we've not really hooked it up to an actual phone number or to a contact center, right? And we have a product called Cognigy Voice Gateway that allows you to do just that. Now, the the details of that is something that we'll publish in another tutorial, because this is really about converting digital to voice and building the experience in the first place. But please note that the way contact center integrations work is by using the voice gateway and SIP trunks to connect the two together, right? So if you have, in this case, a Genesys Cloud CX contact center, you can easily set up a SIP trunk. We have all of that documented, and this then sends the voice call to Cognigy using Voice Gateway, and you can add headers. So you can add a SIP headers with metadata that then ends up in our Voice Gateway through the SIP trunk. And this is the way you would actually want to do it if you wanted to publish phone bots in your contact center. So I just wanted to quickly show you that we have this documented. It is available. It is something that you could set up, but it goes beyond the scope of this tutorial. The other thing that's important is that in some cases you want to hand over a call from Cognigy, right? So from your AI agent back to the contact center. So maybe the AI agent pre-qualified a call and then escalates to a human agent. You can send additional information along with this as well, right? So you have the ability to send custom SIP header information. And the way you set all of this up, and now let's take our main flow again, is by adding a special type of node that we have. So let's say if the question would be about submitting a claim that we want to escalate to a human agent because we just want to figure out the intent and then we want to send it to a human agent, we can use under extensions in Voice Gateway the transfer node for that. And the transfer node lets us either refer or dial, and refer is handing over the call altogether. Dial means we stay in the loop so that we can transcribe, right? So different options, different possibilities. You can add this node and then point it to a target. The target is either a phone number or it could be a SIP endpoint that you configured on a voice gateway level, right? And if that's the case, then you can send along SIP headers, so SIP information as well to hook everything up. So that concludes this tutorial. Thank you so much for joining today. If you want to learn more, please go to academy.cognigy.com or reach out to us if you want to receive a custom demo or more information. Thanks so much for joining, and take care.